Let's do it. Alrighty, here we go. My name is Marty Fox from WHITEFOX. Now, here's the deal.
Welcome to another episode of WTF with the Fox, and it's with the Fox. Great to be back with you, Marty Fox.
There's a lot of foxes.
There's a lot of foxes.
In the fox den.
In the Fox den. And another episode where I think it's great to be able to just dive into your head, into that knowledge bank that is contained inside, because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, there's two questions here. One is, I feel like you like imparting knowledge. Like for you, standing in front of a group, standing in front of people and actually sharing your knowledge is something that you find very gratifying. Is that fair to say?
I think being in a position of leadership within a business, if you're not imparting that knowledge, then the business isn't growing at all. But even outside of business, if it's with friends, I'm always offering some sort of advice. Like, there's a lot of people that sit on the fence that don't want to share it. There's been a lot of times early on, and I remember when Charlotte and I started flipping, we would always ask her father, who has a great portfolio, he's been in real estate for 40 odd, probably longer plus years, and we'd say, Graham, should we buy it? Should we do this? And he'd always be like, if you think you should, then do it. But I don't want to put my foot in it. I'm the opposite.
Yes.
I'm constantly putting my foot in it.
Yes.
Because I feel that there is knowledge there, and I'm putting my foot in it because I'm only going back to past experiences that have been successful, which is why I'm offering that advice. So I think for anyone out there, if you do have experiences and you've got knowledge and you've got lessons that you can teach, don't be scared to say something. And you know what? If it's wrong, well, it's probably wrong for external factors that are out of your control anyway. You can't control the economy. You can't control what governments do. You can't control what the masses think. And for those sorts of things, then that's the risk in investing or the risk in doing something that has upside. With everything that has upside, there's normally a downside. Can
I take that thought though? Because just quickly in terms of wearing your heart on your sleeve, saying what you think, you are certainly that person. I feel like you're the person, you're the person who'll say you got a booger in your nose or whatever else. Even to the point of, and forgive me for saying this, but you're willing to say to someone, hey, I reckon if you fix your teeth, you like that sort of thing. And I know, but you are very honest. You'd expect it from someone else.
Well, only to help that person's life.
Correct.
Because everyone's got insecurities. I've had insecurities. And again, that's just going back through my memory bank. For instance, you want to use the teeth one as an example?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a huge gap in my teeth growing up, and I was self-conscious about it. I got it fixed. Boom. That issue went to the back of
And you want people to feel that. So when you see it, you go...
I'll say, look, if you've got any thoughts of fixing your teeth, go and do it. Because I'm telling you now, you'll feel great.
Does any part of you ever think, God, this person might... Because, some people are very private, some people don't say that, which I totally respect it. I think if you think it, and it's not said in a... You're not doing it for the person's, like... You're not trying to degrade them.
No, it's purely to see them happier. Like, honestly, that's where it's coming from.
I learned that about you over time because, you're not afraid to say, no, I don't like that jacket. No, that doesn't suit you or whatever else. Which most people would go, I love you in that jacket. But then behind like,
there is
I hate
no way I'm throwing a compliment your way.
If it's not earned.
If it's just not there.
Where's that from, do you think? What is it?
Well, I think that's, you're born the way you're born. And it's funny because you look at, say, my brother and I, we shared a bedroom until we were 18. Literally. Same parenting, same everything, but yet we're such different people. So you are born the way that you're born. And if you look at your upbringing, there's certain elements that, you tend to resonate with, parts of your DNA that are a little bit stronger than others. I think personality is just like a visual part of you. Why do you have brown hair, not blonde hair? It's how you were made. And personality comes from that as well. You're either very outgoing or a bit more subdued, or then you've got the external factors like, your friendship groups, which can have a massive impact on the way that, you turn out. So it's the old argument of nature versus nurture. And both of them are just as important as each other.
So going back to the original point about imparting knowledge, do you remember through your schooling, through your university, through your growth periods, standout teachers, the way that they taught, or the way that, whether it's coaches or people around you, taught lessons? Because I see that in you when you're teaching the staff here and others when you go on stage, for example.
I think what I'm starting to learn as I'm getting a little bit older is that my teaching style won't work with everyone, but I'm expecting them to pick up on things because it's worked for me. And that certainly does not work for everyone, particularly in real estate. So I think that when I was going through school, I went to 7 different schools. I moved a lot. I struggled a lot at school. I didn't have that that stability to go home, sit there, have my meal at the same time, do my homework and go to bed. I was either being pulled to mum's house or pulled to dad's house. Both were very busy. Both were very young. They had me when they were 20 and 21. So I was never brought up in that environment of having my head in the books. And I think a lot of that came from actually just the stability of what my timetable was like as a kid. And that's why Charlotte and I, with our 3 kids, it is like clockwork. And I know that there'll be a lot of parents that think, yeah, bullshit. But, our kids are asleep, clocked out between 7 and 7:30. Freddie's 6, Olive is 5, and Bonnie is 20 months. And they're asleep because the routine very rarely gets broken. I haven't seen these kids up late at night. They eat, within that same sort of half an hour period. They come home from school, they play. There is a timetable there. I know it can be quite hard to follow. My parents couldn't follow one because of, we didn't have much money and things were pretty hectic. But, it was one of those things where Charlotte and I said, if we've got kids, we've got the timetable. How do we get on the timetable thing?
Well, I was just talking about the imparting of knowledge, when you were growing up, who was sort of
sorry. So the reason why my schooling I struggled with was because I didn't have that timetable. So I hated school because my grades weren't good. I was kind of the class clown in a way, and a lot of teachers would say that because I'd always be making noise and I'd always be at the back of the classroom, and I made noise because I felt pretty shit at school. I wasn't smart. But I was smart. I had good relationships. I had good mates. There was teachers that I had really good relationships with, and they all said, "Oh, Marty, Martin, if you only just applied yourself, you could be so great. You could be so great." And I think the lucky thing for me was at 15, which is a story for another day, moving overseas to New Zealand. And I actually put myself down a year and relearned the basics. And I said to myself, if I'm going to be in a new country, I'm going to reinvent myself. And I think it's really important for those people that have a chance to reinvent themselves, whether it be moving country, changing jobs, getting out of a marriage that's not working and bringing in a new version of you, a better version of you. I went to New Zealand and it was like a cleanse. And I said, okay, I'm going to leave the class clown antics behind. I'm going to relearn the basics. I'm going to be a good student. I'm going to play team sports. I was always just playing tennis and I was just doing a lot of things individually because I struggled. And I got to New Zealand and I had that ability to reinvent. And I achieved a lot in New Zealand. I finished school, got great marks, went to university and so forth, finished that. But in that phase of reinvention, I also made other errors. I discovered alcohol. I was binge drinking so much in Otago. That's another story for another day when we get our CFO in here. We'll talk about our years at uni together. The Dunedin boys, we sank more piss than anyone in the country. And it's a stat. There's more beer consumed in Otago than any other city on the planet. So I came out with a Bachelor of Drinking Piss and a minor in marketing and accounting. So during that phase of reinvention, I brought on all these other bad things that when I moved to Melbourne to be with Charlotte when we were, very young, we moved in together at 20 and 21. I had things that I then had to reinvent again. So I had a chance of reinventing myself for the second time, which was, trying to grow out of that Dunedin mentality of drinking so much, then going out. Melbourne wasn't like that. Melbourne, this was now at the start of my professional career and meeting new people and business associates. And, I think, you actually learn a lot from yourself. And if you've got the ability to reinvent yourself, stay who you are, but learn from the mistakes that you've made, that's where the growth really occurs.
And in that aspect, who at that point, who are you looking up to? Who are you sort of seeing and going, okay, if I'm going to make this change now, if I'm going to reinvent, looking around these, because to be honest with you, at that time, it wasn't like Instagram was around.
No, there was nothing.
There was none of that. So to finding, mentors and people to look up to was probably a little more challenging.
Yeah, I felt very lost professionally moving back to Melbourne at 21. I tried to get a number of jobs using my degree, but it was the GFC. I went for jobs at PwC, Deloitte, Clemenger. I wanted to be a marketing exec or a cadet in an accounting firm, and no one would give me a job. And it was at a family dinner when Charlotte's father, he had 52 offices in a franchise. He was the founder of a company called Wilson Pride with two other guys, Tony Pride and Marcus Peters. And it was at a family dinner. He said, look, would you come across? He had a chat to Charlotte, and they both thought that I'd be great in real estate. And Charlotte was in real estate, in rentals at the time. And I said no. And
was that because you didn't think you could do it? You didn't like the idea of it? Like, was there a reason at that point?
I had this understanding of real estate that it was the bottom of the barrel, that it was like I was a failure, and I struggled with being in real estate a lot. And I know why a lot of people that have either got degrees or if they've been in the professional services, or they just get into it, they feel like, I'm a real estate agent. Like, I remember going to dinners and lunches and, what do you do? Charlotte and I are in the early days. I'm in real estate. It was looked down on. And particularly when you're in your early to mid 20s, when other people were, starting to get jobs at these big law firms and accounting firms, they had this hierarchy on me socially. And I did struggle with that. I really did not like it. And it wasn't until, a year or two in, when I was earning quadruple of what my peers were, that were in pretty slow moving career paths, that I overcame that, and I understood how hard it was to be a great real estate agent, because you had to be well versed in economics. You had to have a great mind from a psychology perspective. You had to have the ability to have a good read on the play, which is your EQ. So I actually loved the skills that I was developing in real estate, because it was making me a much smarter human, all-rounder. And I got over those pretty quickly once I started doing things outside of my day-to-day, which was the flipping of properties and all the other things that Charlotte and I have done together.
But I think you'd find that's the separation of good from great in this industry, is exactly what you said. It's looked that way because, quote unquote, easy entry or low barrier to entry doesn't mean, well, exactly, it's gotten harder, but doesn't mean that you can't come in with a brain. There's a lot of very intelligent people in this industry, but that's probably from the outside view in. But the separation of good from great is that level of EQ, economic understanding. It's the play reading that makes the good agents successful.
What's hard is that there's a lot of people that can come into real estate and make a lot of money really quick, but then because they've got a low IQ, they stuff it up and they get either sucked into a silly deal that they shouldn't have done, or they say something wrong about the wrong person that they shouldn't. And it's one of those industries where if you build a bad reputation, it can turn very quickly for you. Jumping around too many agencies, there's so many things that can go wrong in real estate if you play your cards incorrectly. And yes, you can do well very quickly, but to do well over a long period of time, that's the hardest part. I'm in my 16th year of real estate now.
Yeah.
And it is an industry that constantly keeps you on your toes. You constantly have to evolve. I say to the team all the time, your listing presentation needs to continually evolve, and it should be reflective of where consumers' minds are at. So think of all the different products and services they're interacting with, and be on that same wavelength. Don't be so old school that you can't adapt. Constantly change your pitch, because when something's too rehearsed, the person that's listening to it can feel it. So you've got to give that ability and sense that you're off cuff, but you know your stuff.
Where did you learn that? Because this is the other thing, is you got into the game, and then it's like, I know you got mentors. Your father-in-law was a mentor at that time, but there's a lot of left to your own devices at that stage.
Well, going back to that question of, when I came into the industry, it was tough because I had no network. I'd lived in New Zealand for 6 years, and I remember that for me, what I did is I wanted to constantly meet people that I thought were doing great things. So I made good connections with my suppliers. Even though I wasn't the owner of the business, I was the cadet. I made sure that I met the people from Domain. I met the people from REA. I met the people that made the boards. I met the photographer. Like our photographer now, I met when I was 21. Jonathan, I was at his first job. He's still shooting now. That's 16 years that we've been connected. So I had this understanding of, well, I'm not just going to list and sell property. I'm 21. I'm not going to get much, but I'm going to understand the way that this business works. And if I know the suppliers and I'm being useful to the key agents and I'm offering them assistance, like doing their letterbox drops, doing their callbacks, I'd say to guys, hey, let me uncover all the PVs. PVs are potential vendors in your buyer lists. Let me just let you know who they are. And once I've identified that they own a property, can you call them and let's see if we can go do a listing together? I want to hear what you say. So I would be not chasing listings. So that's the problem. A lot of new agents, they go out and they want to chase listings. I was chasing potential vendors, propping them up to the key agents in the business and saying, hey, can I come watch you list? So I was the one that was watching all the guns list. I'd watch Nicole list, Josh list, Tony list, Marcus list, Graham list. And I'd be like, oh, it's so funny. Graham's really subdued in his pitch and he's a little bit sort of reserved and talks about architecture and art and wine and all these weird, quirky things. He's a bit funny in his listings. And then I go to Marcus and I'd see Marcus just go straight for the jugular. And then I'd watch Nicole list and she was very mumsy and talking about schools and it was very non-real estate-y, but she was a gun. And then I'd watch Josh and Josh would talk about his auctions. He was a great auctioneer. So I was like, okay, I need to have a bit of a piece of all of this. So I need life experience like what Nicole has. I need to talk about art and wine and renovations and building wealth like Graham. I need to talk about being an auctioneer, which is why I became an auctioneer so early and took a little bit of Josh. And then I remember Tony Pride was just like, bang, in your face. He'd shock you the moment he walked in. I once walked into a listing, asked Pete Zervis, and I literally put my thumb up a bloke's nose within 10 seconds of knowing him. Get Pete on here and ask him about that. We got the listing, but we never sold the property. But, there's obviously a story behind the finger up the nose. Sure. But, that was a Tony Pride thing. Shock and awe. I had him because I shocked him. So, early on I had these great characters that I could sort of like take little bits out of, and then I've turned it into Marty Fox. And that's what everyone should do. Look at... And none of these people were like big, famous, heavy hitters. No. They were who I had. That was the best that I could do. That was my environment. So making the most of the environment that you're in is the key. And
you must be lent on a lot. Well, obviously, we've got some great agents here who probably do that with you and those others around them as well. Lana's fashioned herself off you and others. Same with Mike and Pete. Obviously, Pete was with Greg Hockney for many years as well, so there's that. But you also have people outside. I don't want it to just be totally focused on WHITEFOX because you have a lot of people. You've done ARIC talks and, now that you're doing the block and all these other things, you have a lot of people reaching out to you for advice on, and I'm sure it's not just real estate agents. It's probably salespeople in general, right?
Look, the biggest things that I get asked about, particularly in the second year of WHITEFOX being around, was marketing. Who did this and who thought of that and who wrote that board and who's done this? And for me, studying marketing, the dream was not to build a real estate agency. That was never even in my thoughts. It was to build a brand. So whether that brand was in wine, whether that brand was in architecture, in marketing, it just happened to be in real estate. And off the back of the success of WHITEFOX real estate, people would ask, we'd love some help. And that's when I said to our creative director at the time, Aidan Hathaway, hey, let's start our own marketing agency. We'll call it WHITEFOX Marketing. We've got the funnel of inquiry that keeps coming through from vendors, through people that admire what we are doing, and let's start going. And we ran that business for 6 years. I sold it to him last year, which he rebranded from WHITEFOX Marketing to Fox Hat. And that was just a capacity thing. We grew that to up to 20 staff at its peak, and there was just honestly too much to juggle.
Well, I should say,
for me.
No, I was in on it, and I understood it at the time as well. We will get Aidan on. Because I think
it'd be so good to have Aidan.
There's a really good episode in the genesis of this brand. You two sitting down and working out how to really create something very special. And you're right.
Well, a prequel to that was I had this idea of WHITEFOX, and I did pitch it to an incredible branding agency. and they turned me down.
Really?
And it just happened to be that Aiden worked there, and he sort of like, you should see his fingers, I call him the penguin, like he sort of puts his finger up and it's like this long funny fin, and he goes, I'll do it. And he asked whether or not he could sort of, what's it called when you're doing something on the side? Moonlight.
Yeah.
He asked if he could moonlight with me, and for 6 months we caught up at a cafe in Richmond, top paddock, a lot. Like, you know, we're meant to catch up once a week. But
Well, don't give it away. We'll get it.
I won't give it away, but we caught up a lot, and that would be a great episode to talk about getting WHITEFOX off the ground. It was such a fun period.
I think why it's important, to your point, it's important because it's not just you, it's myself, it's everyone in this business. The feedback overall is often overwhelmingly about the marketing.
Yeah. And you know, to answer the question, you know, people reaching out, the majority of people that have reached out, it's got to do with marketing. Hey, how can you help me make my brand stand out? Hey, how can you do this and how can you do that? And I loved it. And for 6 years, it was a really cool thing. But, you know, now that that's been put to bed, along the journey, there's been people asking me about the kids. How do you juggle? A lot of men ask me, how do you stay present with the kids, with your missus? You're clearly the busiest motherfucker I'm watching. How do you do that? Like, you know, and I've given people some tips, and, you know, people ask, particularly with the 14 kilo weight loss, you know, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. Again, the fitness things that people ask about. Now, I'm certainly not a shredded, you know, bloke ready for the cover of a magazine, but I'm doing the best that I can with the amount that I'm working and trying to put in with the kids. So marketing, real estate, investing, parenting, fitness, like fashion, they're the things I really enjoy, and I share it because I know that it's giving value.
Well, I can appreciate it. Yeah, I think there is also a very good episode on parenting. We can talk about that juggle of particularly as being a dad.
Well, how's this though? Our parents they still don't know what to do. My parents mum's turning 60 this year, dad's 58. They're still learning because they've never had kids that are grown adults.
No, I know.
Like, so we're all just like, you realise that there is no oracle.
No.
And you know how you read the books before having your first kid, and then the first kid comes. I do not remember a page of any of those books.
Well, also, it's all well and good. For me, it's all well and good seeing a video or reading a book that says, now, when your child's doing this, you've just got to remain calm. In that moment, when your child's drawing on the wall or doing something that, like, very hard to hark back to that moment. There's a lot of experiences of being a parent, particularly being a father, I think are very challenging. I know you and I talk about it a lot. So that's something we actually probably should delve into.
Becoming a parent and the lessons that you learn in that and translating it across to becoming a business leader, there's a lot that cross-pollinates.
Well, they're effectively your staff, aren't they?
Pretty much.
And they have a big say.
Well, I put it this way: if you haven't got the staff on board, the vision and the journey, you can lose your family and you can lose your business. It's the same principles.
Well, here we are at the end of another WTF.
Well, we're at the end.
You want to keep going?
Oh, I mean, look, I've got 2 more questions in me if there's anything you want to know.
Well, I mean, okay, well, here's one for you. You just talked about...
do you know what? I'm actually quite enjoying this. What's the time now? Yeah, Charlotte will be walking in from school pickup. So do I sit here with Shu and talk for another 10, 15? Or do I go home and really, this is like feeding time at the zoo?
I just think that the hard thing is with this podcast is every sort of tangent we go on is its own talk topic. We've got the ability to really go deep on some of this stuff. I really want to do an episode, and I think, by the way, feedback, any comments or thoughts of what you want to hear from Marty, but I really do want to feedback and do an episode deep on selling, just on selling, purely what makes a good salesperson. How do you teach that? What's the art form in that? Because I think that... can
I talk about that briefly?
Yeah, of course.
I think very high level, the best salesperson is the one that's the most convincing. Because you're buying into that person's pitch. Mm-hmm. So how do they become convincing? Self-confidence, self-belief, things that you don't necessarily learn in a book. You need to know exactly who you are and what it is that's being pitched. In real estate, a lot of the time, it's actually you as the person. You know, you're not pitching anything other than the fact that they need to trust you to bring them the most amount of money.
Yes.
And you talk about how you will handle it.
Yes.
What you bring to the table, then what the agency brings. Because at the end of the day, it's your tenacity, your communication, your follow-up, your attention to detail, your knowledge of the property, your knowledge of the market, your knowledge of the buyers. and how well you can bridge the gap between the least that they want to pay and the most that you're wanting, and finding that happy medium. That is real estate.
Because if a person has 5 agents come through their house, right, in the lead up to a campaign, those 5 agents are going to have fairly similar bits of information, you would think. And unless someone is wildly different in terms of like, you could get this and everyone else is there, that's going to be an outlier. You're right. At the end of the day, the person's got to pick on this person.
So how's this? If you say everything technically correct, but they don't feel like they can trust you, you lose. If you say things that are pretty much 80% correct, but they really trust you and like you, you get the job. So trust trumps all the other stuff. And you build trust through knowing your knowledge, what you bring to the table, understanding why they're transacting, understanding their situation, so the EQ part. And if you can find the combination of really understanding the process and the details and all the intricacies within the transaction, and overlap that with a really solid presentation of yourself that they can trust and they feel confident, that's where, if you speak to all the high performers in real estate, they've got that. They know their craft, but they know themselves and they know their style. Then the other thing with selling is being able to emulate the people that you're with. So, that's another train of thought where you've got your different personality types, and reading the play, and they're a little bit more analytical, focusing a little bit more on the numbers. If they're a red, understanding what sort of gets them going. If they're a green, if they're a yellow. So, again, that comes back to understanding what bucket they fall into. But you can't trump, particularly as a new salesperson in any field, have a really strong knowledge base.
Is this the hardest? Would you say, and I know you haven't necessarily sold everything else, but is real estate the hardest thing to sell?
Real estate
given the
is
emotional attachment?
Real estate, you're not even selling houses, because you don't get the houses if you haven't sold yourself.
Because other things are items, right? If you sell
the items. So real estate is the biggest ticket item that you can sell that has high volume. Real estate is the hardest, easiest job on the planet. Because you can walk in and all of a sudden get 3-4 listings and make $100,000.
I love that you say, sorry, my wife last night was looking at a listing in Toorak in Melbourne, and I can't remember, it was a $40-50 million listing. And she said, how much would the agent make of this? And I said, look, I'm not sure. It might be on an agreement, could be 1%, could be 0.5%, I'm not sure. She goes, what, so $100,000, $200,000 a year? She goes, how hard could it be to sell a house? I said, yeah, but Gemma, there's only a certain amount of people who can even buy this house. So now you're talking to a very small pool, and you're like, all these things I'm trying to say.
But see how you said there's only a small amount of portion of people that could buy that house? There's only a small amount of portion of people that can list the house.
Exactly.
That's the hard part.
Yes, yeah.
It's listing it. Listing is king in real estate. But, I was always selling products, and Roy and I were having a laugh about this last night. We went and had a little sleepover down at Red Hill. And we went out for a beautiful meal, another little French. I'm loving French at the moment. We had a nice little eye fillet.
Did you get some mashed potatoes?
We had some mashed for fun. And as we were driving back, he goes, do you remember when I was in Dunedin and you made me go and do that? Because I was running a company called Synergy Brand Experience, which was promotional talent. So Cadbury's, Monteith's, chips.
Where you'd go and hand
Rory was selling like a fly spray. And he goes, it was so funny because I'd finished my degree. I was an accountant, and you were in Queenstown doing some up and go promotion, and you needed someone in Pack and Save in South Dunedin to sell these fly sprays that were automatic, and they just go psh, psh. And he goes, I'll never forget, Mum came in and bought 4 of them, and I was standing there dressed as a ranger. And he goes, how you talked me into being dressed as a ranger at Pack and Save in South Dunedin selling like this fly thing. He goes, fuck, it was funny. But, selling product and selling product in a promotional environment is a really good thing to do, because if you're getting into the professional services or whatever it might be, even if you're a dentist, you have to sell. You have to sell your services. You have to sell your skill. If you're a GP, you're selling as well. My GP calls me every 8 weeks just to see how I feel.
That's because you're there every 8 weeks.
Yeah, I am. I'm there so much. Actually, no, that is why I'm there.
You've got a frequent card.
I've got a current double hernia. It's annoying me. Yes. Anyway, We should do an episode on my
On your
health.
medical, yeah, I know.
So, selling product, understanding how to pitch, what brings people in, what draws them in. Again, energy, your tonality, up and down, in and out, being engaging. And that goes for not just real estate, that goes for everything.
Do you reckon we can we can probably get an episode on just pure... Who if I said to you, right, we're going to do an episode on selling, who do you want next to you talking about?
I'd want Mr. Hollywood. Craig from Mercedes.
Oh, Craig Howard.
We've got to get Craig Howard.
That'd be good.
He is one of the best operators because he always makes you feel important. Whenever I've bought a car off him, it's just seamless. His team is silky smooth. I believe he's got one of the best Mercedes operations in Australia. Beautiful family, 3 amazing kids, beautiful wife. The guys, I'd love to have Howie in here. And he's been a great supporter of WHITEFOX over the years and myself. And yeah, I look up to him.
Okay, we might have to organise that.
Done.
There's lots more to come. As I said, we're going to have Aidan Hathaway on. I want to talk to him about the genesis of the brand. That's a really important one. We've got some good guests coming. There's lots happening in WTF.
And it's good to always touch base with you and speak about things that are in my mind. And, if we keep getting some great guests, which I know that we've got a good lineup, then as long as the people listening are getting value, happy days, and comment, make sure that, we're hitting some of the things that you want to listen to. And I'm enjoying it. And I think at the moment we're sitting in the top 10 business podcasts on Spotify, which is pretty funny.
We're in top 100 of all podcasts in Australia, which is I should say we didn't even talk about the fact that we actually we've repositioned today. For those who are watching, obviously some just listen on Spotify, you won't even notice. But we decided to change the feng shui.
Well, you wanted to sit back over here, and I like mixing it up because I get bored watching the same shit over and over. So if we keep changing positions, happy days.
We might end up outside as well. There's going to be some out there WTF, that's for sure. So remember, you can get this anywhere. You get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, and of course YouTube and across our Instagram as usual. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Huey.
We'll see you next time.
Speak to you soon.